Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast, where each week we bring the latest insights and strategies to help you, the higher ed marketer community, thrive in today's competitive landscape. My name is Troy Singer, and I am always side by side with my friend and co-host Bart Kaler. Today, we are excited to continue our incredible fall season of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast with a topic that's becoming more and more crucial with every passing enrollment season: how AI and bold strategies will transform enrollment. Today, we talk to Gil Rogers, founder and principal of GR7 Marketing. He has 20 years experience of higher ed marketing and enrollment management. He is also an expert in using AI to streamline enrollment processes and create personalized student experiences.
Yeah, Gil's such a great guest today. I love the fact that he talks a lot about just the idea that sometimes as we're trying to kind of get out there and do things, whether it's generative AI or using these bold strategies, there's this sense of we kind of get frozen. There's just a natural inclination to just be a little bit hesitant. And so I think he kind of talks through some practicalities of that. I see that a lot in the master classes that we're teaching with AI, is that there's this hesitancy, there's this fear of kind of stepping out there. And a lot of what Gil talks about is, ways to overcome those fears, ways to get creative, and the ways to try new things, and ways to lean into generative AI. So it's a really fun episode today.
I agree, Bart. And with that, let's jump into today's conversation with Gil Rogers, founder of GR7 Marketing. Gil, we always get things kicked off with our guests by asking them to share something that they've learned recently that would either fall into the interesting, fun, or valuable to our listener category. So I'm hoping you have something that will fall into one of those categories.
How about a Venn diagram that includes all three, right?
Oh, there we go.
So I was scrolling on the social media timeline of doom the other day, and I found an article about dogs, of all things. I have a dog, a golden doodle, and she heard me mention dogs, so she's going to start moving around my office. But did you know that when dogs are playing with you, when they make that like sneezing noise as they're playing with you, that is their way of telling you, I am playing, I am not going to hurt you. I did not know that. I just thought that was just a noise that my dog made when she was happy and excited. But when I took her for a walk yesterday, and I shouldn't say walk because now she's going to think that's what we're going to go do, I started making a sneezing noise, and she got so excited, started jumping up at me and being like, let's play, let's play, let's play. So my sample size of 1 proves that article that I read was completely factually accurate. But when the dog makes the sneezing noise when they're playing, it means I'm playing, I'm not going to hurt you. That's what they're telegraphing to you.
It's awesome.
Thank you. And that does fall into the valuable and interesting category, and fun as far as I'm concerned. So you get an A on this quiz today.
Hooray! New trophy for the shelf. Let's go.
There you go.
Now, let's see how I hold up, because after that fun fact, I want to then turn our conversation to some of the topics that we would like to talk to you about. The first one is the discussion on the fear of failure and change, which is something that you speak about. So you've mentioned before that the fear of failure can hold many higher ed leaders back from embracing new strategies. And love to know, what do you think the most common reasons for this hesitation is, and how can institutions overcome it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question to start off with. In a lot of ways, when we think about legacy strategies, whether it's buying large listed names or travel or advertising at this point, billboards, these are all things that fall into that we've always done it that way bucket. And it's hard to walk away from things that we have been doing for so long, even when we have data that demonstrates that it's not necessarily the right way to go. Even limited data is better than no data for a lot of people. And that can kind of be that safety net that holds them back from trying something new. My old adage used to be that nobody gets fired for buying more search names, right? They get fired when they don't hit their enrollment goals and they tried a bunch of new things. And the reality is, for a lot of institutions, you're only as good as your last enrollment cycle for enrollment leaders. And so if you try too many new things and you don't knock it out of the park, then that puts you at risk, right? And I think the thing that's important for institutions to kind of remember now is in the climate we're in, there is no option to not try new things, because we're seeing that there are outside factors that are driving the need for that type of change. So I think when I speak about the kind of fear of embracing change or the fear of failure, it's that's what it is, right? It's not that we want to change. We know that there are better ways potentially to be doing things, but if it doesn't work, then it's our job, and it's not just our job, but it's our team's jobs, it's faculty's jobs around campus, and that's a lot of pressure for people to have on them.
Yeah, I think that you've brought up a good point there, Gil, in the sense that I think that adage of, if it's not broken, let's not change it. I think that, that it is broken because it's not working sometimes. But I think that people just get paralyzed with the sense that, well, I can't do it. Because there is that risk of how's it going to affect everything else. And so talk a little bit about that idea of how does one get into that innovation mindset with this idea of feeling like I'm frozen. I can't move beyond this. So do you have tips for people that are in that position?
Yeah, I think one thing is we have to acknowledge the problem, as you mentioned, right? And I think one of the things I'm hearing a lot from folks is, we're, especially in admissions, is, this year we're up in applications, we're up in admits, we're up in completed applications. Awesome. All great, positive metrics. We're up, but then we're just behind, but we're close in our deposit number. It's like, well, okay, so if we're up in applications, that means our team is reviewing more applications, which means they're doing more work. And we're up in admits, which means we're admitting more students, which means we're using more resources to focus on yield. And then we're flat or just below, and we're okay with that. But that means that we're doing more work to get the same net result with smaller staffs and smaller budgets, right? And so I think the first step in acceptance is acknowledging the problem, right? And so we first need to do that. Then what we need to do is really just look to courage and say, we need to address these challenges, right? And I think it's this type of process is easier when you are a enrollment leader who is, a senior member of the staff that is tied in with leadership at the institution. You look at the old, maturity model of enrollment management, right? Where if you're not at the table being a part of strategic decisions around campus, it's a lot harder to take on those risks because you're not able to tie them to the outcomes in other areas. That's, I think, a big step, is making sure that you have visibility with senior leadership around the institution and making that change. And I think on the other end of that spectrum, though, is as a newer counselor. I remember when I was a second year admissions counselor, I started getting into helping with digital media stuff and social media stuff, and I was blessed to have a supervisor who was okay with giving me the space to try new things, right? And so I think leaders on campus need to better equip their teams to be able to have the space to try those new things. And I'm not saying to completely cut name buys and travel and advertising and all the things that I spoke about before, but if we took 5% or 10% of our mind share and our budget from those types of initiatives and said, we're going to do a test, just an MVP, minimum viable product for a new digital campaign or a new outreach program or a new whatever, name the software. You go to conferences and go to the trade show floor and find something that's interesting. You don't have unlimited resources or time, but you can spare 5% of this or 5% of that and probably be able to get a good solid test. And a lot of these more innovative companies that I work with and I talk to every day, they are looking for testimonials, case studies, proof points. And so being able to say to those providers that might have this innovative solution that you're kind of afraid to spend budget on, meet them somewhere on being able to be that type of a guinea pig for them by investing and being a partner versus just looking at everything like a vendor.
Yeah. I think that's important. And I think that you bring up a really good point about the fact that, just taking that little 5% from here or there and doing some things. And I think taking those measured risks to do something, I think is important and trying to be innovative. But I know that, and higher ed is a little slow to change. And it's a sector that is steeped in tradition. It's steeped in academia. And I think that being at the table is an important part. But are there other things that you encourage folks when they try to think about how can I encourage that the sense of courage in my team. What are some just practical things?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we fall back on the higher ed is slow to adapt or glacially slow, et cetera. And a lot of the folks kind of use that as an excuse for the lack of action, right? It's like, well, higher ed always takes its time. It's like we're getting to a point where that doesn't fly anymore, right? Our consumer, the student, is looking for different modalities to consume education to be prepared for the next phase in their life. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional brick and mortar, first time, full time, straight from high school to college experience, right? And so we need to understand that if we're going to survive as institutions, we need to adapt. And I think that's the point, is bravery and courage, and also a little bit of just opening our eyes and having common sense and saying we're at the point now as an industry where we can't just fall back on the old excuses of lore, right? Where it's, it takes time. We don't have resources. We don't have budget. Well, you know what? We're not going to have resources or budget next year when the institution's closed because we didn't hit enrollment targets and we're out of resources, right? And so, especially as smaller institutions, this is a big opportunity for them to really thrive and say, hey, if we don't try something new, we're going to be the next one on the news that has our doors closed, right? Let's avoid that by really being bold and making change happen. So it goes back to acknowledgement and understanding that, that the end of the day, we need to be able to try new approaches and new things and leverage the data, and not just gut decision making or, we've always done it that way type of an approach.
And it is that fear of failure. There's a lot of excuses that we like to tell ourselves if we don't say it out loud. But I mean, you talk about the idea of opportunities to try new things. I mean, Troy, I think you're getting ready to ask a question about generative AI, and boy, there's some opportunities there. So why don't we make that shift, Troy?
Sure. As we all know, generative AI is becoming more prominent as a tool in higher ed, and especially within enrollment. Would like to know what you think some of the most important areas where generative AI can help institutions improve their recruitment enrollment process.
So I think generative AI is a fad, just like the internet and just like social media. It's going to go away. No, someone's going to be listening to the podcast and stop right there and say, "Wait a minute." No, if you believe that generative AI is a fad, then you should stop listening right now and probably get out of higher education and probably move into a different career, right? Because this is something that we have an opportunity to get right with the technology that we got wrong with social media, right? And social media, when it first came out and started, it was about connection, it was about sharing and engagement. And then along the line, the algorithms took over and politics got involved and advertising got involved. And now obviously these companies need to find a way to monetize, but that's really what it is now, is for higher ed institutions in a lot of ways. The institution specifically, you're more managing ad campaigns and then hoping that student content goes viral, right? And there's got to be a better strategy around these sorts of things. And so generative AI, I think it's one of those, we have to get past scratching the surface by using the tools as toys. And I say that as like the depth that a lot of providers in the space and a lot of resources in the space have right now is, oh, use this tool to rewrite my email, make it more compelling. Okay, now it's going to be a vanilla email that's packaged the same way that everybody else's has been, or help me with subject lines. These are things that can help you be better, but we've got to get beyond just playing with it for toys. With that said, I think there are definitely great use cases to use it as toys. I was in a meeting with one of my clients earlier this week, and we did a fun kind of brainstorming session, and they used it to make a Mad Libs. They used ChatGPT to do a Mad Libs fill in the blank kind of a game thing, which was really fun. You just fill in verb, adverb, noun, etc. And then they had a prompt already built. They dropped it in, and it was just a really fun way to create a company specific Mad Libs. So there's your tip for listeners. That's a way to use it in a fun way. Sure. With all that said, there are ways to use technology to be more efficient and effective in our work, specifically in enrollment and admissions, with better engagement with students. And I'm not talking about just automated chatbots on websites. What I'm talking about is using these tools and resources to do what old school predictive modeling and that sort of stuff that has been around for forever can now be updated and be more effective with the use of technology. Imagine a world where we can take our human resources that are kind of sucked dry at the top of the funnel, so to speak, move and reallocate those resources to the middle and the bottom of the funnel, and let the robots do the work on the prospecting side, right? And that goes back to the original question of like fear of failure. Well, you know what? We have lack of people and resources to get things done. Use our resources more effectively. And what are our most expensive resources and our most valuable resources? They're the same thing. It's our people, right? And so how do we use the technology to get the redundant tasks, the redundant questions out of the way so that your counseling staff can do a better job at engagement at middle and bottom of the funnel? And there's definitely new technologies that are going in that direction, but it's not just rewrite my email and make it more funny. It's you leverage the technology to identify the students who are a good fit for the good match for the institution, engage them and provide them with information. And then I'm going to focus on the students who are actively engaged and actively identified and application ready versus the name we bought because their PSAT score matches our profile.
Yeah, I love that point, Gil. And I think that it's one of those critical things that we start realizing that we have resources, and let's use the resources for what they're best at. And so, there's a great quote that I use in some of my presentations by Seth Godin, and he's talking about if AI is going to compete against you, you're in trouble. And that's why we need to learn how to use AI so that we can do the things that only humans can do. We need to use AI for the chores so that we can do the relationship things, so we can make the decisions, so that we can array things together. It's going to be, our job's going to be different, but at the end of the day, higher ed enrollment is going to be relationship based. It's always going to be relationship based. And that's what the counselors can do better than any computer ever will. And so we've got to free up the counselors from their chores to be able to really focus in on those relationships. And so
absolutely,
I love that. So with that in mind, though, I mean, there is that idea that there's a lot of automation in there, that, hey, we can now send out text, we can send out all these different things. How do we make sure that relationship thing doesn't get lost in just the sea of noise? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I feel like I read an article a few weeks ago, probably a couple months ago now at this point. Time flies when you're having fun. It's the kind of like what happened with Starbucks, right? Starbucks used to be this like great coffee shop experience. You go in, kind baristas and great, custom drink, etc. And then somewhere along the line, automation and factory line logic came into it all. The drive-through probably is the big driver of a lot of these things, but
yeah,
and mobile ordering and all these sorts of things. And what happened is people are sick of overpaying for Starbucks, because the reality is when you remove the experience from it, the coffee, it's okay, right? And so why overpay for it for a not great experience? People pay premium for the experience. That's why Disney World exists, right? Is you have these people want that extra layer of attention and focus, which is why when you look at, Starbucks sales is declining, that doesn't mean people are drinking less coffee. It means that they're drinking it at their local coffee shop where they get that type of experience. Right. I would venture to guess that coffee is actually on the rise because we have less people to do all the work. So we need more coffee to keep ourselves energized and moving forward, right? So I feel like there's that certain element of, we need to be very careful in higher ed around how much we let the automation take over. And there's that clear, as you said, Bart, that distinction between where the human kind of handoff is. Students are okay with AI in specific bursts and in specific places. And it's making sure that we're using it in those specific places and not the others, right? Because the end of the day, we don't want to have our institution, we shouldn't want our institution to be the factory line assembly of higher education, right? That might feel nice in the short run, where if we could hit our enrollment goals by just being a factory line where we're manufacturing enrollments, great. But the reality is that's not what's happening, right? Like there are humans on both sides of this, well, for lack of a better term, we'll call it transaction, right? And the humans need to connect and engage with each other. I used to say years ago that as every new type of technology has kind of entered, or communication platform or system has entered the mainstream, the fact is that human connection and the need for human connection has never left. It's just how and where those interactions and connections take place has changed. And so it started, with the telephone, right? And you go telephone and email and text messaging and live chat on websites, video, right? These are all channels of communication and methods that people use to engage and connect. And now this is just a matter of maybe we let the robot do a better job of matching us to the people we should be talking to, right? And that handoff happens after the robot has done the good job of doing the matching. And I know that's a little scary for a lot of people to kind of like let the robot take the wheel, but at the end of the day, when we're dealing with such high volume of prospect lists and communication channels and so much competition with other institutions and everything else, something's got to give, and we can't throw people at the problem because we don't have enough of them, and there's enough budget to employ more of them anyway for a lot of folks. Yeah. But we also don't want to sacrifice that personal interaction, and so I think that's where the automation to the right place, but being a facilitator of the connector of human engagement is really where that needs to happen.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's some real good wisdom for the audience, and I think part of it too is I'm trying to kind of process, because we've been doing a lot of training and a lot of implementation, helping people understand all the options there are with generative AI. I mean, you talk about the predictive nature, being able to upload data and be able to talk to your data rather than waiting for, institutional effectiveness get back with those, query reports that we need. I think that, what are you seeing as far as schools being able to implement AI? I mean, is there challenges because of the perception of budget, or just the infrastructure that they have, or training, or just the leadership is seeing it as a fad or seeing it as a toy? Where do you see the challenges, and especially for people listening, where they're like, boy, I'd love to be able to do that, but my team, they just don't want to do that?
Generative AI went from the AI is coming for our jobs narrative to AI is going to be a resource narrative very quickly, right? And I think which is good, right? I think the big initial fear of, it's going to take everyone's job went away really fast. And then we realized that obviously, to borrow the cliche, it's not AI that's coming for your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI that's coming for your job, right? And that's everybody says it. We all agree. Let's move on, right? Like, so now we all agree that that we need to incorporate it. I don't think it's a budget issue for most institutions. I think that there are so many existing tools that they use that are doing the work to incorporate AI, that those research, with their CRM platform or, their live chat provider having a chat bot option, like they're getting access and visibility into the AI pieces, because the companies that build these tools know that if they can get AI incorporated, their products are going to be more efficient, will increase their margins and all these sorts of things, right? So there's benefits to working with the service providers in the space, because they're the ones with the focus and the mind share on developing the tools so that you can focus on the student interaction and engagement, right? And I would say you this is one area where you let the consultants and the people who are focused on this work give you the guidance and the expertise to use these tools effectively, versus trying to go it alone. I think if a school tries to go it alone, that's when it gets prohibitively expensive, hard, isn't done well, because you've got so many things vying for your attention that it makes it impossible to put that focus and that effort into it, right? It's the old adage of do what you do best and outsource the rest, right? And so if you can focus on building that personal interaction with students, and let the consulting firm that you're working with that has people who are dedicated to this, let your CRM, use the tools in your CRM platform, but then challenge your CRM platform, as one example, to go beyond the rewrite my email prompts and give you tools and resources that help you do your job better, right? And so I think the biggest hurdle institutions are facing is if they think they need to do it alone, then it's going to put them down a path where they could, but it'll take a lot longer, cost a lot more, and not come out as good, right? And they need to identify the right channels and resources to help them use these resources and tools well.
Yeah, and I think the way you know it as well as I do, part of the value that bringing in consultants is the fact that they are seeing everybody else and seeing success and how it's working at other places, and so I think that adds to it as well. So very cool. That's a great conversation.
Both Gil and Bart, I'd love to change the subject of our conversation over to the enrollment cliff. And as both of you know, many schools are concerned about the upcoming enrollment cliff, and rightfully so. Would love to know, Gil, if you know of any steps that institutions can take now to prepare this or for the shift and to remain competitive.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, we're at the phase of the enrollment cliff where if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you're like on that little piece outlet that's like right over the edge where you feel like you're going to fall off, right? And it's no longer a beautiful novelty and opportunity to have a good experience. It is like imperative for you to not lean forward any further and take another step, right? Or take a step backwards. And I think that, what we should do is take a step back and look and say, okay, what are some of the things that we can do? And I feel like there are many things that institutions can and should do that are things that we should have been doing all along to help us be more competitive. Things like focusing on reaching dropout and stop out students and say, let's bring students who have already been in the higher ed ecosystem back into the fold, right? That's a should be lower lying fruit way of getting more out of our community and putting more in to our community. I was speaking with someone that works in alumni engagement a couple weeks ago about this exact topic and having that mindset of like, if we are able to pull in those dropout students, help them, waive the late library book fee or whatever it is that's keeping them from continuing to progress towards their degree. Now we create students who are even more happy when they're done because the institution brought them back, did the work to help them be successful. Now you've got more in your alumni base and you've got more people being more proactive in supporting your institution. I think that's a very low-lying fruit way of helping to engage in support. We're not going to just magically change what the birth rates were 18 years ago and more students into our traditional first-time, full-time undergraduate pipeline. That's just not going to be the case. We can focus on yielding more of those students that we admit, but now we're in a zero-sum game because every student in our pipeline can only go to one school. And so at some point that number is going to drop. And where's everybody going right now? They're going to the large fat flagship public institutions, or they're going to the super selective institutions, and our regional publics and our regional privates are going to get squeezed out, right? And so those institutions are uniquely positioned to go after those dropout students, as well as try to focus more on yield and unique programs, right? Those are my kind of initial knee-jerk reaction thoughts.
Yeah, and I'd probably add to that, Gil, too. I think you're right. We cannot change, the fact that there's a supply and demand issue. So I think a lot of schools, especially those regional colleges, are going to have to get more creative. I mean, you're going to have to look for adult learners. You're going to have to look for those stopouts, those dropouts. You're going to have to look for those other means of getting people in that, you might not be filling up the dorms like you once did, but that is also an opportunity to figure out how can you get more of those mission fit students? How can you make sure that you're going after the right level of students at the very top of the funnel too? Because I had a post today on LinkedIn that I put up about, I think 500 is greater than 5,000. I'd rather have 500 students in my prospect pool that I know are good fits for my institution rather than another 4,500, to your point earlier, that just checked a box on the PSAT that somehow, somewhere might apply to us. And so I like that idea. I guess one question I'd have for you as a follow-up is, what do you think are some strategies that would help to diversify all of this and help mitigate some of these issues? I mean, it's going to be diversification. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think part one is we know who the students normally, if we're talking traditional first time, full time, right? We have to go buy lists from different sources of people we might not have ever connected with before to introduce ourselves, educate them about our brand, raise awareness, do all the outreach, etc. Right? Students who dropped out, we know who they are because we know who enrolled and we know who didn't complete their degree. So we have our prospect list. We don't have to go find it. We know who these people are and can use that as a resource to identify the students that we can then proactively reach out to. So I think that is part one. Part two is when we think about modality and we think about what types of programs institutions are offering, if there's a dip in demand for the traditional liberal arts programs and et cetera, we have to think about the demand for the right programs, the demand for degrees today, right? And so I think thinking through what types of programs we can add and offer and invest in versus cutting everything back, right? And I think I had Seth Odell on my podcast months ago at this point, and he, from a marketer's perspective, you need to spend into a decline, right? Because if you cut back on your sales force and your marketing outreach, what you're going to do is you're going to then go into a death spiral because you don't have enough people in the field, or you're not doing enough to raise awareness and visibility. So you're not getting the applications you need. So then you're not going to hit your goals, and you're going to cut back further. And now you're in this unstoppable death spiral, right? What can we add? Apprenticeship programs? Can we add in, programs that have guaranteed outcomes? Because that's what people are questioning with the value and the quality of higher education right now is it something that is worth the investment? And so can we add in programs that demonstrate that it's worth the investment? And that is where things like apprenticeship programs might be a path that people might want to consider. So I would say focus on the stop-out dropouts. You already have those lists. Figure out ways to get them back into the fold, waiving late fees and tuition discounts and those sorts of things, as well as investing in high demand programs.
Yeah, I love that. And I would also just add, as we're kind of wrapping up here for a second, anybody who's a marketer on this side who's listening to some of the things that Gil's talking about, and it's like, well, I've never heard that frame, stop out, drop out, or I don't quite understand the enrollment process. Because I know a lot of times some schools get so siloed that, marketing is outside of enrollment, and, they end up kind of serving them, but don't really understand it. It's to your benefit, marketer, to really understand and learn as much as you can about enrollment, because you can really bring a lot to the table. So I really appreciate all that you're saying, Gil. I think it's just so critical that we all work together to kind of shore the defenses on this thing, because it's going to get rough over the next couple of years, especially for the ones that you've identified. So,
yeah. We end each of our conversations with our guest by asking them if they had a quick tip or something that they could offer that could be immediately used by a listener to move a brick or to make some headway in the next week or so after implementing it. What piece of advice would that be?
I feel like where we are right now in the enrollment cycle is we're past our fiscal year turnover. So we've committed a bunch of budget to things, right? But we haven't done all of the things that we've put into the budget plan, which means we do have flexibility to take that 5% from one thing and move it to something new. And I think my recommendation would be take that step of bravery to say, we're going to look at one of the things that we've heard about, thought about, but have always been afraid to spend the budget on, and bring that budget to that provider and say, hey, I have this much, what can we do? Would be an opportunity, because I guarantee you that the newer providers in the space that are doing some really innovative things with AI, with student matching, with digital marketing, they're looking for case studies and testimonials and data and proof points just as much as you want to see them when you're considering these types of approaches, right? And so find a partner for that 5%, and it will yield long-term results that will drive your success.
That is also a mic drop. Thank you very much, Gil. Gil Rogers, founder of GR7 Marketing, and we've been talking about how AI and bold strategies can transform enrollment. Gil, if someone would like to continue the conversation or maybe just connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me there, just Gil Rogers. You can come to my website, gr7marketing.com, or just shoot me an email, gil@gr7marketing.com. Super easy. Look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you, Gil. Bart, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think it's been a great conversation. Thanks, Gil. I think it's always good to talk with Gil and kind of hear a little bit. I really want to just kind of underscore, use the word bravery and kind of leading boldly on a couple different things. And I think that's going to take. We're going to have to flex those courageous muscles that we have. I mean, there's going to be some rough times ahead, and I think that we've got to be brave. We've got to be willing to take that 5%. Do some measured risks, do some things, be okay failing forward on some things. I mean, I would rather you fail forward a little bit than be frozen and not do anything, which is going to be just a certainty that you're not going to be able to do anything. So let's just be bold. Let's be brave on some of those things. Let's lean into those opportunities that are measured and even learning to lean into generative AI. I mean, it's a lot more than Mad Libs and writing a couple emails. There's a lot of power in these tools that are either freely available or for 20 or 30 bucks a month, you can have a ton of opportunities. And so I really appreciate that, Gil, and I appreciate all that you're doing for schools. And I share the commitment that we have to really be able to promote the good thing that higher education is. So thanks for being on the show.
Gil, Bart, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. To our listeners, we invite you back again next week for another edition of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. Take care.